What's up out there? In this video, we are going to take a look at the movement speed penalty that you get from body armor and shields, and we're going to look at both Path of Exile 1 and Path of Exile 2. We're going to look at PoE 2 first, but we are absolutely going to look at PoE 1. And I find it weird to have to even put this in here because it's the same developer that developed both games, and one can logically deduce that the stuff that they do in one game is going to carry over into the other one, and a lot of the same choices are going to be there. They may have some differences to things, but it's the same formulas, the same code. A lot of the same things came from one into the other. But I get weird comments that, you know, stop trying to compare PoE 2 to PoE 1, stop trying to make PoE 2 into PoE 1, or some weird variation of comment like that. And I find it very odd because it's the same developer and it's the same code in a lot of cases, and you'll see that this is basically the same game. There are differences, but there's a lot more similarities. So let's dive into this whole thing. We need to establish the baseline. This is the slow movement speed you get from PoE 2. Now, how do we know that movement speed has been modified? Well, if you look under the word miscellaneous, you'll see that it is completely blank. That is because there is no modifier to movement speed at all. I don't have a positive, I don't have a negative, it's not affected, so it doesn't show up. How can I prove that? Well, if I take these boots, the only thing these boots have is 15% increased movement speed. If I throw those on, you'll see that I now have a plus 15%. It's pretty easy to figure this out. It's not 14, it's not 30, it's plus 15. So you can also reason out that there's no other modifier on this, like the boots don't inherently give me any positive or negative to movement speed, because I'm seeing a 15% increase on the boot, and I see 15% over here in the tooltip, or whatever you want to call it. Now, I can further demonstrate that if I put gloves on, that does not change anything. If I throw this amulet on, that does not change that plus 15%. And if I throw the belt on, it's still plus 15%. So, why can I not put that on? Do I need... Oh, I guess I need this ring over here. That is still plus 15%. If I take these boots off, you will now notice that this does not say any movement speed at all. That's because none of this stuff that's equipped modifies my movement speed. Now, I'm going to take this piece of armor that is pure strength. There's no dex or int or anything on this. It's pure strength-based armor. This is now a minus 5%. Oddly enough, if you go to PoE 1, it's also a minus 5% for strength-based gear. Now, we take that off. We take evasion. This is pure dex, pure dexterity. This is only minus 3%. This one is int, so this is pure int. This one is also minus 3%. It's shocking how those three are exactly the same in PoE 1, which we're going to look at here in a minute. Now, shields are a little bit different. There is a negative penalty to shields, but not always the same. I don't have enough examples to show for it. I just can't find the gear to buy, and I've gotten rid of all the extra shields and stuff that I had. This is what I could scrounge up. So we're looking at this. There's no penalty to this. There's no positive. There's nothing. It doesn't show up. So we're at 0 right now. If I throw this armor, this shield that is pure strength on, it gets a minus 3%. Oddly enough, that's exactly the way PoE 1 does it. Now, if I throw this as a focus, it's basically the int version of a shield in PoE 2. It doesn't change. There's no positive or negative to having this thing on. It's a focus, so it's not exactly a shield, but I think that is, I don't believe there's any other way of getting a shield that is int based. I don't think. Again, it's kind of a limited sample size because I just didn't have enough gear I wasn't able to find enough gear at the vendors, and I'd have to go grind out some stuff. Now this one is armor and energy shield, so strength and int based. If I put that on, it's minus 1.5%, which is different than PoE 1. As far as I could tell, every shield combination, whether it's strength, int, dex, strength dex, int dex, whatever combinations I could come up with, they were all minus 3%. Here, this shield is minus 1.5%. So it looks like hybrid is a little less of a penalty. Now, like I said, I wasn't able to find a pure int or a pure dex version of a shield. I don't know if they exist. The stuff I could buy from the vendors was very limited, but that is the way it is. That's the way things are. So to recap, strength-based body armor is -5%. Int or dex-based body armor is -3%, and they're both -3%. It doesn't matter. Gloves, boots, rings, amulets, helmets, weapons, none of this impacts your movement speed unless you have a prefix or a suffix or whatever that directly does. Like these boots have 15% increased movement speed. So this is plus 15%. It's easy to see this dot goes over to that dot and it's a straight line. It's not rocket science to see that. So we basically see that strength-based body armor gives you a -5%. Int or dex-based body armor gives you -3%. The hybrids might be slightly different. I think I have some hybrids now that I think I bought some hybrids and I swapped out. What did I do with them? They're right here. So this is armor and energy shield and evasion. If I throw this on, and let's just swap these out so that I can demonstrate, you get -4% for this armor and energy shield based. The evasion and energy shield is -3%. So it looks like pure strength is -5%, hybrid strength is -4%, and hybrid anything other than strength is -3%. So that's our baselines for PoE 2. Let's see how that is in PoE 1. Okay, over here in Path of Exile 1, what we're looking for is something under freeze avoidance. Right now there's nothing here because there's nothing modifying my movement speed. And in fact, if I take these rings and amulet off, you will see that there's nothing under here still that says anything about movement speed. If I take this pure strength-based chest piece and put it on, you will now see movement speed modifier -5%, which is the exact same as Path of Exile 2 according to my notes. If I look at an evasion-based and dex-based armor, put this on, it's -3%, which is the exact same thing as Path of Exile 2. If I take the int-based one, it is also -3%, same as. Here's a dex int version, also -3%. Now the interesting thing is this is a strength and dex based version, which I actually have to equip a few things on here. I don't remember what all I have to equip, but now I'm able to equip this armor and evasion. You'll notice there's nothing in here about movement speed. I can demonstrate that. Putting this armor based on here shows -5, or strength based armor is -5%. Take that off, it now shows up. It now no longer shows up. Now if I take the armor and evasion version, in PoE 2, this is actually -4%. In PoE 1, it's -3%. Slight difference. Now, let's move on to shields. If I throw this shield on here, you'll see that it is -3%. That is because this is a pure armor or a strength-based shield, so it's -3%. In PoE 2, this was also -3%. I know it's pretty shocking that these would be the same. So then we move on to int-based, which is over here. This is a pure int-based shield. If I throw that on, it's -3%. Now that is actually different because the int-based focuses or whatever they are in PoE 2 is 0. You don't get any movement speed, and there is no movement speed modifier on here. It's cast speed, mana regen, stuff like that. So I know this is a unique, I tried to buy some shields for it, but this is what I had. There's no movement speed on here, so it shows that shields are basically all -3% in PoE 1. This is an energy shield and evasion base, so dex and int. If I throw that on there, this is -3%. Again, there is no movement speed positives or negatives on the shield, so the inherent value of the shield underneath is -3% movement speed. This one does have +3% increased movement speed, but it is a dex-based shield, so this should be 0. And in fact, when I equip this, you'll notice that there is no movement speed penalty because it's 3. So if I take that off, it stays -5. If I put that on, it stays -5 because it's basically offsetting the penalty. So you get a +3 movement speed on a -3 base, which equals out to 0. So you can also see on the passive tree, there is this Art of the Gladiator, which has ignore all movement penalties from armor. So you can totally negate whatever you get from the body armor. So what did they do? In PoE 1, strength-based armor, body armor itself, gets a minus 5% penalty. Everything else, body armor-wise, gets minus 3%. Doesn't matter whether it's hybrid or pure, it's all minus 3%. I've not been able to find anything that's different. And I wasn't able to find anything on the wiki that gave like definitive, this is what you get. So that's why we're here doing some testing. Now, in PoE 2, hybrid strength armor gives you minus 4%. It's not the full minus 5%, but it's also not as forgiving as the minus 3 that you get in PoE 1. So there is a difference, and there are differences on the shields. Like some shields are going to give you minus 1.5%. Other shields are solid minus 3%. So there are differences, but the vast majority of things from PoE 2 is very similar to the way PoE 1 is. Shocking, I know, but some people don't quite get that. The main thrust of this wasn't to compare the two games together, although we did. The main thrust of this was to show that there is a movement speed penalty. It is real. It does exist. These are the values that you're going to see. So in PoE 1, you will have like an 8% negative to your movement speed if you equip both a strength-based piece of armor and basically any shield in PoE 1. This comes up minus 8%. In PoE 2, it's an 8% negative for strength-based, but it's differing depending on what else you put on. So if you put on a focus or whatever, you have no movement penalty at all, and you get nothing but benefits. You might get a slight movement penalty from the equipped armor because you're taking evasion or int or dex-based, int-based, dex-int, whatever. But the people that run in pure armor or pure strength-based builds are going to take a lot more of a penalty than any of the other builds. So anyway, hopefully this has been helpful and demonstrates what movement speeds penalties you take from the different armors and shields in both games. Anyway, that's going to do it for this video. We will catch you on the next one. Take care.